Welcome to another episode of Anatomy of a Strategy. I'm Carlos Pacheco.
And I am Tara Hunt.
We're back with a new episode with a new guest.
Yeah, so this one, so last week with Georgiana, I was like, okay, my mind is blown. Galit had us like literally screaming at different times because one of the things that Galit Ariel, who we have on today, who's a techno futurist, is working on is this idea that in the future, it's kind of like there's going to be kind of no screens. We're not going to have like the whole like face in the phone or face in the laptop. And what does a world with all these new interfaces look like?
And, when you think about from a marketing perspective, like the amount of interfaces that we're going to have to deal with when we're beyond the screens.
What does your brand sound like? What are the gestures associated with your brand? I'm like, I can't even with this one. Enjoy the heck out of this. We really had a great time chatting with her. We are very excited to have here live in our studio.
That's a rare occasion.
It is because, well, first of all, amazing people of this caliber are very rarely free enough to come and spend any given time with us. But also, this amazing woman spends a lot of time on the road. So we're pretty lucky to be able to grab her while she's in town. Welcome, Galit Ariel, to the Anatomy of a Strategy podcast.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
For those of you who may not know who you are, I will just give it like a quick little blurb. You heard in the introduction all of her accomplishments, but we did meet working on Futurithmic with Nokia. She was the first star in the series of teaching us what's going to happen in the future, an AR expert and enthusiast. But please do tell us a little bit more about yourself from your own perspective.
So from my own perspective, I always find it difficult to explain what I do. I'm a terrible elevator pitcher. And a terrible pigeon in a hole. Because as I like to say, I'm a woman of many hats. Literally, you'll always meet me wearing a hat. So it's not untrue. I have diverse background, but currently I would say my focus is indeed looking at tech futures and especially exploring the immersive space and augmented reality as my beloved, best emerging technology.
Yeah, well, your book, Augmenting Alice, is really cool, not only because it's really interesting, but it is an augmented reality piece in itself.
Yeah, it was actually, the book was originated from a little domestic dispute between myself and my husband, which is he's a 3D.
Do tell, spill the tea.
I won. I'll ruin the ending. I won, as I do. But he's a 3D game designer, and he once came home with the Oculus SDK 1, and he said, "This is it. The future is here, and VR is the best, and you have to try it on." And I tried it, and I was underwhelmed, even knowing that it was, of course, a development tool, etc. And we started having a discussion about AR versus VR, and one wrong person said, VR is the future and the most immersive thing ever. And I said, I don't think so. Mm-hmm. And in order to prove him wrong, I then dedicated my entire studies at the time I was doing my master's degree in proving him wrong, paper after paper. And when that was not enough, I did my thesis about augmented reality implementation strategy. That did not persuade him. So I made an agreement with him, which I agreed that he will comply with, that I will write a book about AR to prove my perspective.
Wow.
And if he will be persuaded at the end of it, we will actually augment the book itself, because I wanted to not just talk and research AR, but actually see what AR can do, even in the medium that I was using as a book. And it was a very interesting experience because it was before all the tools that are available now are there. So we really had to develop from zero. So it was a great learning curve, but also it was an opportunity to see how can we add, let's say, more entertaining content. So the book has in the chapter breakers, you have like little animations, and we try to see like, can we add sound and, little animations and what happens when you do it. But also what we aspired is to bring the book to life, because books have the virtue of actually physically being there. Yeah. But the copy you bought cannot be normally updated. So we decided that all the charts or data references that we had we can periodically update them. So the book is constantly updated, right?
Yeah, so it makes a book, which is quite often when you print it, it's print and done, and
Yeah.
And if there's a typo, there's nothing you can do. But
let's not talk about that one.
But now
there's 21, but don't tell my publisher.
But now you can update it on a constant basis. Also, epic way to win an argument with your husband. I
have to say that
you have to step it up, Carlos.
You're the book writer here.
Well, that would mean that, easy for me to win an argument.
Yeah, exactly.
That's so great. Well, I mean, as you were explaining this, like we were talking, this is anatomy of a strategy. People who are listening are generally in marketing and wondering, what with everything that's available to them out there, like strategically, where do they go? And AR, frankly, has sort of seemed a little bit like a fad rather than necessarily like a solid tactic to deploy. But you're working on some pretty cool stuff in general. Maybe instead of just diving into that, talk a little bit about the applications of AR in a marketing space.
Yeah. So AR I want to first talk about the awesome opportunities of AR and what it actually is, and then the challenges that we currently have. So I think a lot of people underestimate AR and think about it like as a little gadget or a little hat trick. And perhaps some applications of it right now are that. But AR is something that is not just a technology. It is a new medium, a new interaction platform. And this is the great potential of it, especially because we're talking about blending digital content, like the infinity of digital content, into the existing physical world, the behaviors and rituals and the spaces that we have here. And this is the beauty of that. So going back to the argument that some, let's say, VR enthusiasts will have about VR, which is, quote, the most immersive platform ever made, I always argue and say, well, I know a super immersive platform that is free and has a social layer built into it, and we know how to use it, and that's physical reality.
That's real life.
Yeah. I mean, let's not underestimate what's the behaviors and interactions that happen here. And when you can power it with digital content and new interactions and not trying to hijack that, that's actually a super powerful tool. The challenge is, and here we go to the challenge, that we're building right now for this future where this technology will be accessible, understood, diffused, and it's getting there, but it's not there yet. And although everyone with a smartphone today can access AR, there is still a gap in usability, in user interface, in understanding what experiences will work in it. But we are getting there. So this is where I urge people to actually not think about tactics yet, but to start building an in-house strategy and thinking about it. These are the days, we're at the days before the World Wide Web, right? But I'm talking about the real World Wide Web, where the world itself, the physical space, is connected. And you actually don't need smart devices because we can use AR in various forms to make every stupid object smart or every stupid environment interactive. And this is the exciting value of it. And it's also inherently social versus VR, which is great for other things.
Right.
But
Escape.
AR, escape and immersion into parallel experiences and universes. It's fantastic for that. That's why game design will always be something that is very relevant for that. But with AR, there are so many opportunities because you can build on almost every real life interaction and every real life space and scenario. The question is, do we need it always? And this is where I have to say, even as an AR enthusiast, no. Like sometimes, let's just scale back and ask ourselves with AR, like with any emerging tech, just because we can do it, that's not the question. The question is not, can we do it? Yes, we can. Do we need to do it? Does it add value? Does it enhance your existing experience, your existing service, your existing space? If the answer is yes, then start building. If the answer is no, then think of whether you want this or another thing to be added.
I'm sure there's like a should we do it thing, right? The whole ethical side that could be also a part of the equation.
From a marketing standpoint, we know that there is very much a shiny object syndrome when it comes to this, right? It's not even a question of should we. It's like, oh, we need to be on this. It doesn't matter if it really fits our
squirrel.
Yeah, right. It doesn't matter if it fits a strategy. Or sort of like the even the brand itself, right? It's almost like, I always consider VR, AR, I have a much more belief in, but VR, I totally put in the same boat as 3D television. Yeah. Right. And sort of like everybody was like, oh, everybody's going to be 3D television and wear glasses at home. And I was like, nah, the hardcore gamer maybe, and that's about it. Right. And I tend to agree with Nimi in terms of the most immersive. Doesn't mean it's the most widely adapted or widely used. It's going to be I personally think.
The book.
Then,
I guess.
All right. Yes, I have to read the book.
Well, I know what you're doing this weekend, Carlos.
But yeah, anyways, my point was sort of like, about the fact that we're in a world where marketing agencies are wanting to go, or marketing people or CMOs and also, so they want shiny object syndrome. And how do you scale them back and sort of like, hey, maybe AR isn't right for your strategy, right for your product. Yeah, that's sort of like a question I wonder, do you ever, because brands reach out to you, right? Yeah. They want your advice. And like, do you ever sort of tell them like, this is not right?
A lot of times, more times than ever. In the sense that I'm telling them, I'm willing to come in and explore with you. What you're describing to me is interesting. Mm-hmm. But if you're doing it as a growth strategy, then this might not be the right thing for you. If you're experimenting, you're willing to put money into experimenting through this investment, that's fine. But let me come in, and that's what I do. I do training and workshop and boot camps for executives and internal teams to figure out whether or not, AR strategies are right for them and whether or not it's a long-term, high impact, low impact, long-term or short-term. And once you have that, then it's your decision. It's a little bit like social media, right? It's like the early days of social media. Everybody opened a Facebook page. Now, some of them, so they were there, but was it valuable for all of them? Did they understand how to run it? Not necessarily. A few did, and those who did spiraled up, but that was also aligned with the specific consumer they had and the channel that was right for their message and the clarity they had. So this is the same thing. So you can have your AR app or device or activation. The question is it something that will amplify your business and your product? Yeah. You can do it anyways if you want to be there. I'm not going to stop people, but it's not the most valuable thing.
So, I like that you brought up the social media example, because very much like social media, it wasn't necessarily that they had to go get a Facebook page or whatever, or all the accounts, and jump on the bandwagon without knowing why or what they were doing. That was, of course, a bad move and has led to a lot of people thinking that social doesn't work. But social is ubiquitous, and it's here to stay. Not necessarily the social platforms as we know them as they are, but people are inherently social. So maybe at the end of the day, brands will start to think social. So similar to what you were saying, and what really blows my mind, and you just kind of like opened up a whole wormhole there for me when you were talking about like the whole world becoming an augmented like space in that way that, like I think about the Internet of Things and stuff like that, which is sort of the other side of it, right? How things can talk to you, but you don't necessarily even have to make an object like a book. You don't have to digitize a book. You just create a layer, an augmented reality layer on it. And what I think is really interesting is, maybe they don't jump on board and go like, what's our AR strategy? What are we going to do in AR now? But how are we going to think about the future? Because I've been thinking about this a lot without screens. Right? Like I really do 100% believe that our future isn't going to be like us with our faces and our phones. Like screens are going to go more and more by the wayside. That's really interesting to me. Like, is that part of what you talk to brands and agencies about when you have those conversations?
Absolutely, because I actually find that the value of AR is so one of my latest customers is a retailer that is very much embedded in the brick and mortar and not on the digital, yet, and doing very well. And to them, I say, well, actually, AR is fantastic because AR augments the reality. It augments the assets that you have. If you do it wisely, you'll just add value to your existing experience. You don't need to hijack your stores and like make things happen, but you can add the right things to it to bring them to life and to shift and change them with lower costs on certain cases, especially when you scale up, and be in that digital space without having to scrap your physical space. This is the beauty. This is augmenting reality, right? So I actually think augmented reality, funny enough, is of course it will be adopted by the digital natives, but it's such an inclusive technology that people that are not necessarily digitally apt, right, that are used to analog interaction will be able to interact with augmented reality because much of it is based on physical gestures and movement in space. And this is something that we all do. And once it does mature to be reacting to it in real time, and we'll have user interfaces and operating systems and experiences that are built for that, because some of the experiences that I've seen in AR, and these are the ones that are giving bad reputation to AR, are based on behind-screen interaction, 2D, let's say, behind-screen interaction, even if they're made in three-dimensional objects, that are just copied and pasted into the physical space, and they don't acknowledge the actual space, the actual behaviors, and the actual value of the physical. Once that will die out, and it will, because it doesn't necessarily bring value, then you'll see the real potential of AR, and this is great for non-tech savvy people.
Right. So what do those interfaces look like? Have you thought about this? Like, because I think the first thing that always comes to our mind are those goofy glasses that Google did a few years ago.
Oh, Google Glass? Well,
beyond, what does it look like beyond wearing a goofy pair of glasses?
Well, actually, I have a little bit of, I don't want to say love-hate, but yes, I will say love-hate. I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with wearable tech. Because my background is also partially in fashion retail. And it's so hard. It's so hard to get people to wear things and to keep wearing them. It doesn't matter how smart they are. There's so much ritual. There's so much restrictions. There's so many things that are challenging there. And especially when we talk about head-mounted devices. For example, I'm supposed to be wearing glasses, and I don't because I just don't like it, right? And I also think that, yes, mobile phones are restrictive. You're not hands-free, but everybody has them in their pocket. So this dismissal right now that is happening smartphones are going to die. Look, the sales are going down. I'm like, because everyone has one.
Yeah.
So how can we build on that first instead of building a bunch of new devices that will pollute our planet and will be outdated before, we know the whole story. But even the wearable devices that will work better in terms of gesture recognition and movement and interaction, they are still singular. So I will still have my reality. So it's semi-social, but it's still going to be my, it's going to build a multiverse versus a universe. And this is where I have to go back. And I was on a panel recently in Copenhagen where we were talking about that. And I said, my vision, my hope for AR is spaces. Because when you have an augmented space, you're actually not limiting the user with the threshold of like already being digitally apt.
Right.
Because you're also asking, even if it's eyewear, that right now the prices are so high.
Yeah.
Still in the thousands of dollars. Even if it's a smartphone, which is still in the hundreds of dollars, if not the thousands. This is not really digital inclusivity. This is not really a social medium. Right? And when you create an augmented space, when you really think about it in a more inclusive way, you're creating the real behavior, the real purpose of technology, which is to better the human experience, not just as an individual, but as a tool to connect and a tool to interact better.
Oh, that's very interesting. So it'd be like when you go to a museum or an art museum or whatever, and you push that button, and then like they tell the story of that painting or whatever, but in a different sort of way.
Yeah, and also beyond the visual aspect.
Yeah.
So we are still thinking screens, sound augmentation. There's so many other ways, haptic and sound,
Smell.
scent. Scent is very difficult for other reasons because it's very
sensitive.
It's much more personal. It's much more impactful in certain ways, but it also it's hard to exchange it. So once
Do you remember smell-o-vision?
What?
Do you remember there was this whole talk years ago
How do you know about how my brother called me when I was small? Who told you that? What? Smell-o-vision?
Yeah, like years ago there was this
they were
talking about like how you could smell what was on TV.
Yeah.
Like it was this whole experiment.
Yeah, but how do you get rid of the smell? Like have you ever smelled burnt toast? Really immersive. Get rid of it. This is actually the problem also when I used to
you
do
just don't want to smell.
activations and experiences, and we tried to do a lot of things with smell. It's there is an issue, a technical issue with a personal technical. It's the most complex, most ambitious and complex, and it will get there. There are certain headsets that are trying to already implement it, but sound and vision, sound is definitely missing an opportunity still. And I talked about it in my TED Talk about like the idea of soundscapes.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So like when you use sound, you're actually hitting so many notes.
Right.
That
so
are
to speak.
Still enabling the individual imagination and interpretation in a way that visual sometimes limits.
Yeah.
So like I used to call it the Pinterest effect. I don't know if you noticed that every coffee bar started looking the same at a certain point because we created this visual aesthetics that was flattening the local culture and local expressions. You could go into any coffee shop anywhere in the world and you would have like the coffee grain bags and the bearded barista and the exposed wood. Yeah. And there's something interesting and nice about that, about the diffusion of culture. But there's also something that I think is negative and kind of like eliminating the unique cultures and experiences. And visual, I believe, is more prone to trigger it.
Right.
Feels like AR is only going to really become mainstream when it becomes much more like, it's already started, like there's already seen some technology in the space where it's more like Star Wars, where it's projected in the air, right? It's projected.
You just say Star Wars.
Not Star Trek, you mean?
God, no, he's right.
Oh, Star
That's
Wars.
the one thing that I can't negate. The holographic.
The holographic
holographic.
stuff.
Oh,
right?
I thought you were
and then you find yourself much more closer to the almost like the not digital space I'm sort of bringing in my marketing speak, but much more about like the out of home space, right?
Three-dimensional. You're summoning three-dimensional,
but more like a banner. Like a billboard, right? Like that's why brands are gonna sort of start think about that way, right? As a space, right, outside of your thing, and where everybody can just look at it and engage with it.
Well,
right?
that's what they need to think about it. It's a spatial platform, and this is why most brands and most platform have now moved from all this confusing talk, AR, VR, XR, MR, to spatial computing.
It's XR and MR and all those R's.
Ignore them. Okay. I can give like a 1-minute spiel about all the R's, the RR. So there is actually something that is called the virtual continuum that explains all the aspects of virtual physical platforms. And it's from 1984 by Milgram and Kishinev. I hope I'm pronouncing Kishinev right. I'm always worried about it.
Sounds like it would be
Kishinev.
Yeah.
Kishinev. And basically they talk about having this. So follow my voice, and imagine you have an invisible line that represents the virtual continuum. On one end, you have physical reality. And physical reality means that we have physical experiences that are experienced in physical space. Actually, let me redo it. Physical reality talks about physical content that is experienced in a physical space. On the other very end side of this line spectrum, you have virtual reality, which means that we have virtual content that is experienced within a virtual space. So if you were to play an animated game while wearing a headset, the experience is within the headset, the virtual world in the headset, and the origin of the content is virtual or digital. Everything in between is called mixed reality because you mix a little bit of one and a little bit from the other, right? And there you have two different ways to mix reality. One is called augmented virtuality, which is closer to virtual reality. And a lot of people call it, even in the industry, the 360 videos. So the way you mix, you actually are taking real world, physical world content and you experience it in the virtual space. So if we take a 360 video of Mount Fuji, right, and we experience it through a headset, you actually augmented the virtual. You added content to the virtual. So that's how you mixed it. And of course, closer to the physical reality, you have the augmented reality, and that's when you add digital content and experience it in a physical world in real time.
Like Pokemon Go.
Which
is like the most famous example.
Yeah, which is now it is, you can call it truly augmented reality, but it's debatable on the original one whether it was geolocated filters that were interactive. But let's say yes, but the better example that I have that most people haven't considered, now they're starting to understand more, the Snapchat filters, all the facial filters. They're actually been, in my mind, the most successful augmented reality feature because most people that have any smartphone would have experienced it. It's real-time augmentation of your features. It's easy to use, and it's been the most diffused, most successful application in my mind.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that one actually takes me back to the ethical question because there has been so much, young people especially get the dysmorphia, that
Snapchat dysmorphia
that sets in when their Snapchat filter makes them look like their skin look perfect and their features look cuter or prettier, and so they're wanting to look like that in their
and they actually go and go to plastic surgeons and fix their physical appearance to match their digital filter.
That's, I guess, part of that Pinterest effect that you were talking about too, right? Because those sorts of filters, that sort of application, that visual application then creates a new standard of beauty
of course.
there as well.
Well, I think, again, like any technology, it's impossible to predict any human behavior, but what is missing and what needs to be very heavily embedded for developers and for people that apply this technology is indeed the ethical part of it. And I talk a lot about it, as you know. Even today, we're still considering digital content as not real. I always correct people when they say, well, AR isn't real and, physical world is real. I'm like, no, anything that affects our perception of reality or our behavior is real. Mm-hmm. Social media is real. The behaviors there are real. They're just not tangible. So we have to separate unreal from untangible. And because people think that digital content is not real or less impactful, which has been disproven through multiple examples, from social behaviors to politics, ... 2016. You cannot treat, especially immersive tech, because we're talking about applying it in the physical world, you cannot treat it as we did before, 10, 15. We know better and we should know better. Yeah. So I always urge, as part of the digital strategy of AR implementation, there has to be much better testing, much higher accountability, and better speculative design around it.
Right.
And it's starting to get there, but we have seen behaviors being nudged even through Pokemon Go, and I'm going back to it because it was such a phenomena. But we saw people walking into traffic. We saw people swimming into the middle of the ocean and drowning. And talking about not so immersive. I don't know a lot of VR that killed people. And I'm not saying that the app killed people, but people are... this is a platform that, when it's used in a bad way, will influence people's behaviors in a bad way. Mm-hmm. And we all know that good tech can be used by bad people as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's the negligence part, but there's also the abuse and the privacy issue, and the security issue around AR. Because again, we're talking about taking together all the new emerging technologies, including biometrics, including real-time tracking. We're talking about AI. We talk about real-time reactive algorithms, and then using AR as the interface to mediate that. So there's a lot of things to consider when we think about AR. And this is something that has to be taken seriously.
Yeah, well, you just think about like even the fake news and stuff that's going on now, if that's layered onto the real world. And especially when, like, as you say, it becomes a more accessible technology, because if it lives in spaces and somebody just shows up without having to learn how to program something or even download an app in their phone.
The tools are there. They're getting so...
And there's this layer of fake news on top, whatever. Like, you could even say, like, it could be somebody could somehow publish that, a store owned by a certain ethnicity is serving up some sort of terrible thing, right? By like just layering it in something, right? Depending on how they use those spaces. So for sure, I could see it being used for evil. Maybe 10 years ago, I wouldn't have seen it. Yeah. Right? I was a digital utopian, and now I'm a bit of a digital dystopian.
I'm a heterotopian. Yeah. I'm a heterotopian.
Bitopian, whatever it is. Okay.
I'm a bipolar-topian, I guess. I believe we'll have both. We'll have the best and worst like we do. And what I'm trying to do is kind of reduce the worst.
Right.
Reduce the worst. Like, let's be more conscious and do less harmful tech. This is not, if you're a tech lover, why would you do it? And if you're a tech hater, why would you do it? And especially with the technology as amazing as augmented reality, I'm very concerned, and I'm a big advocate within the industry and within the commercial realm on being very mindful. And I often actually say that I'm happy it's not there yet, because it leaves enough time to do it right.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping it will be done right, because we want good tech applied in good ways, right?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of like similarities to the way, the web was adopted, right? It was adopted in this sort of everybody free situation, right? And
so lovely.
well, everybody's so lovely.
Let's
the problem is that
What's the worst that can happen? Well,
yeah,
there comes darknet.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, swinging back to the positive side. What do you think are the best examples now, or that you've seen, or that you can maybe that you can actually talk about that you're working on?
Well, I'm working on. I just got funded for a large-scale sustainability-focused AR activation. So AR for good, and that's amazing because it's not just a beautiful platform. It's educational and it's purpose-driven. And I actually believe that there's a lot of very interesting things happening with immersive tech and AR in the arts and installation realm. A lot of artists are adopting it. A lot of traditional art forms are exploring it. So I had a really great talk with the Royal Shakespeare Company. So they're looking at the theater and the spectacle world with combination of immersive tech, which is really interesting. There are examples in the music industry and entertainment, of course, painting. So I think it's a really interesting realm, a little bit more interesting than even the startup or the tech industry itself.
Right.
Because we're really at the early stages, and I think people underestimate the value of art for innovation, exploration, and experimentation, especially when we talk about a technology that is three-dimensional and spatial. Right. We haven't seen the killer app yet, in my mind, because I don't think AR will be an app the way we think about it. I think it will enhance the way we experience spaces. For sure, the way we will touch things again. We won't just swipe and click. We'll reinstate the value of texture, the value of color, the value of the real world. This is what excites me the most. I came from physical design, industrial design, and I like to touch things. I like the fact that we discover through our body and through tactility and through our senses, and it will bring it back. And I think technology or some technological platform have deprived us from this sense of awe and discovery and exploration. It kind of confined us to this square space, to very restrictive behaviors and interactions. And I think this will open us up again and will open the world again to people that are not necessarily device savvy or led to interacting in the real world. This is what excites me. That's why I think this is the queen of technologies, because this is where it will really become a tool for humans, for physical humans in physical world. This is the beauty of technology.
For sure. Look up and around again.
Yeah, I keep thinking of like, you go to any like major music act, right? Like, what they do to create that show. It's such an it completely changes the arena or the space you're at, right? And that's the industry that I feel can sort of jump into that. And as we talk, and I talked furiously about the billboard, I remember that scene in Back to the Future 2, where Jaws comes out, Jaws 20-something comes out, and goes on Marty McFly, and that's commercial and entertainment, right, and arts, right. So,
but I hope brands are more imaginative than that. Like that it isn't just about putting a hologram,
of course,
but to sell things.
Well, Again, that's the question. What is the purpose? Is it really to sell? So I've seen some not so interesting augmentation in packaging, because packaging actually, and for some reason, distilled drinks and alcoholic drinks got a lot of AR treatment. And some of them were like, okay, so it moves.
Yeah.
So what? But then I saw some really great implementations. So Jack Daniel's actually made their traditional number 7 graphics become like a 3D pop-up fold book. So we have these scenes, animations that tell the history of Jack Daniels, and it's so appropriate to what they're doing, to the craft, to the brand. And I think it's a beautiful storytelling vehicle, and it actually gives another dimension to the idea what is a packaging. It's a tool to communicate your brand story and values, and it just adds more layers to it. Again, without taking away the value of it, without the augmentation.
And
so
it's
it can
more
be done.
sustainable.
It's a
right?
lot more sustainable.
Like than printing a book that you put in your package, right?
Yeah.
That people might throw away.
Yeah.
Like you actually have nothing that's used up.
I actually believe we might move to an augmented economy of things because we like to own things,
Yeah.
but we might not be
Why not?
able
Oh, I'm not saying why
to
not.
have physical things as much as we wanted to
Yeah.
because production costs and shipping and your music today is a virtual asset.
Yep.
And again, I'm not taking away the value of vinyl, and I love it as well for what it is. But there are a lot of things that we buy for vanity, but we don't necessarily physically need.
Yeah.
The virtual, like just the people would have laughed at you if you said that about the virtual economy.
Yeah, I mean-
with like what's the game now that's everybody's playing? Why am I forgetting it?
Fortnite, right?
Fortnite.
Yeah. Oh my
Yeah.
God, the kids are paying like
Yeah, spending hundreds of dollars
on virtual goods.
on virtual goods,
So
right.
why
and
not?
it gives them satisfaction,
Yep.
and there's no waste to it. So I'm kind of like I acknowledge that humans have a need of vanity. We won't get rid of certain things altogether, but we could build on the things we have. If we look at fashion, like the potential there, instead of buying a new print every season, you purchase a new digital skin every season, for example, eventually.
The emperor has no clothes. Like maybe you're not wearing anything,
That
but
too.
everybody just sees you're wearing something.
Except of your mother because she didn't get the glasses. But there's so much potential there, and when you think, especially in terms of ecosystem and economics and sustainability, I think it has huge potential, and it's not going to happen overnight, but it could happen, and possibly should happen on a lot of levels.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I do like the fact that there isn't a lot of waste. I mean, there may be time waste and all this other stuff waste, but it's not like a physical like printing of things, plastics and everything kind of waste.
Yeah, you still consume some energy for development. Like if we go to Bitcoin stories, like Bitcoin sucked the energy of the world. Yeah. So we'll have to look into that in terms of sustainability, but in terms of waste, for sure.
But in some ways, there has to be movement on that side for energy efficiency with digital development as well.
Yeah.
I hope in the future. Mm-hmm. So we'll see.
Yeah. We'll keep our physical fingers crossed.
I know we're going long, but I just want to. Have you heard of Sleep No More?
Yes.
Yeah, it's when you were mentioning the Shakespearean theater. Like I was thinking about how interesting that experience is to really immerse yourself in a Shakespearean play, right? Mm-hmm. So for anybody who's listening who doesn't know what Sleep No More is, it's an immersive theater in New York. It's like it takes place in this building where there's several floors and Hamlet is playing. Or no, Macbeth, is playing.
Adaptation of Macbeth.
Well, no, it's actually Macbeth, but the different scenes are playing kind of simultaneously or a different, like not in a linear fashion throughout. Yeah. And it's modernized, of course, but throughout this building. Have you been? It's pretty interesting.
I haven't been, but
because you could go like hundreds of times and have a different experience.
Exactly. Yeah.
Every time, because you go and come across different characters, other people you interact with, like, and have a different experience. And I think of like how cool would it be to have those sort of experiences, not just for a theater piece, but.
Well, AR will have to think about the industry itself. Will have to think about it in the sense that, and this is also a challenge that augmented reality has, because it doesn't live in a confined space like VR, right? It lives in this open platform we call reality, where things happen. You have to compete with actual physical interactions. And if you can find a way to be reactive to it in real time, this is the real win. So there's a lot of talk about mirror world, which is not a term that I necessarily agree with because it refers more to a digital twin of the world. But the point of windows and mirrors and something that they haven't used in the term mirror world, a mirror is still a very passive tool, right? A mirror mirrors what you do, but in real world, technology mirrors our behaviors.
Right.
And then we mirror the interaction with it. And it's like an infinity mirror, right? Like we affect in our behaviors the way technology is made, and then technology is shaping our behavior, etc. So for technology that is applied in real world and not in this exponential growth hockey stick realm, the strategy of what happens, and this is where speculative design and real strategies need to be put into place, like what happens when real people interact with your wonderful platform or product in real time, and how reactive are you to that, and how adaptive you are to that. And this is why I always advise, right now at least, I always advise, unless you have limitless budget, like start small, start with nuances with AR, start exploring what it means to you and to your brand, and build from there rather than start massive. Unless it's my platform that I'm building now.
Then that's a whole other story.
But it's meant to be built as this and not as a final product. Because like you said, I think eventually people do appreciate, especially nowadays, the agency that technology gives them and the freedom that it gives them versus, let's say, a one-way, it's a dialogue. It's not a monologue anymore in a lot of cases. So this is also a big challenge for AR. But if you understand the physical, you'll understand AR. So for a lot of digital agencies, I tell them, actually, you have to now do the counter work of everything you've been doing. You've been trying to digitize everything. Now you'll have to,
make it analog.
Well, understand the physical better, and then see what applies still from your digital discipline or know-how. And some of it will transfer, some of it won't, and some of it now has to be built and invented. So if you talk about interfaces, for example, it's a whole new beast. Like it's not screen confined. It's in situations and environments that are less ideal. Like how do we create reactive interfaces? I like to call it liquid interfaces that kind of like work around shapes and around platforms, and that users will expect to influence as well. And a lot of it will work on traditional interfaces, just like our desktop is a representation of some physical objects like the trash bin. Right. Because we need that, and some of it will be, again, reinvented, reshaped. That's the exciting part, right?
Yeah. Building like a whole new context on our real world. This is so cool. People are definitely going to want to know, if they don't already follow you, they're going to want to follow you after this. So where would they find you?
In Toronto. No. That's too stalky. You know where I live. So get to Tara. She'll tell you where I live. Well, I'm on LinkedIn. I have my personal website, galitariel.com, and I have my company website, which is wonderlandswithar.com. Wonderlands.
You know what? I just got that. I don't know how it took me. Like I was like Wonderlands.
You're just
AR. Oh, God.
You just thought that I'm dyslexic, which I am.
I just thought it was a clever way to spell Wonderlands.
Or Twitter, I'm at Galit Ariel, and on Instagram, I'm at the AR Girl. And I think these are all the platforms.
We'll make sure to put the links on the description. And also, if you want to hear more from Galit, she was just on the Futuristic podcast. There's a lot of videos out there. There's her TED Talk that I can't pronounce.
TED, T-E-D.
Yeah, it's really tough for me right now. Yes, and she's all over the internet. So if you Google her, you'll find a lot of information. Thank you very much for coming to the office.
Thank you.
Big thank you to Galit for stopping by the office and having a great conversation with us. If you want to follow Galit, she is on Twitter at Galit Ariel, and you can check out her website at wondarlands, wondar with an A, lands.com. If you haven't done so yet, subscribe to the podcast on your player of choice. We are available on almost all of them: Spotify, Deezer, Overcast, Apple Podcasts. We'd really appreciate a review on Apple Podcasts if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. Finally, if you have friends or colleagues that really enjoy this podcast, enjoy the discussion, please share it with them. We really appreciate any exposure that you give to us. Our little podcast is growing. We want to keep it growing. So anything you do to share the word would really be appreciated. Have yourself a good one. See you next time.